Okay, we're back after a month, and we're going to lecture number 4 from Teachings for Victory, Volume 7. President Cada, this is the encouragement to a sick person. Now, you know, everybody knows somebody that's sick if they aren't sick themselves. There are lots of kinds of sickness, as we know from the other Go show about illness, that, you know, illness of the mind is considered sick, just like the flu or COVID or anything else. So it's not always about that. The reality, though, is that birth, old age, sickness, and death cannot be escaped. Okay? So the reality is that you must be aware that you don't control your longevity, you don't control your future. I mean, you've already set in motion through your karmic behavior those events, but you don't know them right now, okay? So if you presuppose certain things for yourself that you actually haven't created the karma to experience, you know, you could presuppose that you're going to live a long life with no health problems or this or like that, or the level of wealth that you have at any given moment is going to stay consistent. Nothing in this world stays consistent. What was the last thing Shakyamuni Buddha said when he died? On the, you know, Nirvana Sutra. Everything is impermanent. There is nothing that is permanent. All of existence is impermanence, okay? So we should understand that. Now, that's actually the whole point that I'm going to try and make now, is that, you know, we've read, in fact, we just read, I think, in the last Go show, or pardon me, maybe it was the Daimoka Lotus Sutra, but certainly we've read Go shows before where, actually couldn't have, because this is something that only occurred after Tatsunokuchi. In something that we read in the last year or two, we've heard that Daishonin refer to himself, I'm the only one that can save the world, that I'm the father, I'm a parent to everybody now, right? Shakyamuni said the same thing, right? So what's the difference between when Shakyamuni said it? Why did Shakyamuni say it? And why did Nichiren say it? Did they really father and mother all the living beings? No. So I'm going to go to, I'm just going to convey my sense of what's been said here, because it's mentioned in this Go show, and it'll be mentioned in the Go show lecture. And it's really the fact that had Shakyamuni said that kind of pronouncement prior to the Lotus Sutra? No. Okay? So he says here, I say I am like, this is from page 105 of the Simile and Parable chapter of Lotus Sutra. Okay, I don't expect you to have it. He says, I say this to you, Shariputra. I am like this rich man. I, most venerable of the sages, am the father of the world, and all living beings are my children. Now that sounds like a pretty grandiose statement, okay? But it's really not if you understand what he's qualifying it about. What is he qualifying it about? He's opened the door to Buddhahood to everybody, because this is now the 16th chapter, or this is now the Lotus Sutra, where he's going to finally reveal the truth, right? Okay. The same thing happens and how do you reveal the truth is what? What has Shakyamuni got to do with? The Lotus Sutra and the former and the middle day of the law. The Lotus Sutra loses all of its efficacy after the second 1,000 years. Period. That's in the Great Collection Sutra. That's from Shakyamuni. He says it's going to be so twisted and distorted it won't have any effect anymore. Okay. So what did the Daishonin do? In that 5th 500-year period, he was able to study all of the teachings of Shakyamuni and realize, let's just take the dude literally, okay? And when he says, I have not revealed the truth prior to Lotus Sutra, let's not worry about that. Let's focus. What is it in the Lotus Sutra? And then he qualifies in the 16th chapter that even though he seems to enter extinction, in fact, he does not. Okay? What's that mean? That means that we all phenomena goes through the cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death, but there's never death. The original state includes all of life. Okay? So once a teacher reveals a teaching that frees the people of an age, okay? Because the former and the middle day of the law were two different ages. They were for the age, they were for Shakyamuni's disciples to attain Buddhahood. The latter day of the law, the great pure law, occurs. Okay, it's brought forth as is predicted in the Great Collection Sutra. And it just so happens that the Daishonin came up with this epiphany about what the sutras were really saying and what the core element was. It was the Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge-kyo. And that's how he came up with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo on the night that he then professed it at Seichoji in his big lecture about what did you learn while you were out traipsing all over through Nara and everywhere else at all the temples, right? So again, at that point in time, the Daishonin revealed Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. But at what point in time did he reveal himself to be the Buddha of the latter day? The Buddha of the 10,000 years of Mappo, not the 1,000 years of the former or the middle day. It was Tatsunokuchi. That's why all of these Goshos that we're reading are provisional as it relates to the Daishonin's teachings. And that's why he will still be mentioning Shakyamuni Buddha in here, as though Shakyamuni Buddha is his guy that he prays to. Okay? I don't think after Tatsunokuchi he had that understanding anymore. That's not what he expresses. That's not what we understand, okay, as Buddha, practicing the Buddhism of the sun. So this goes on from him declaring himself the father of the world and the most venerable of all sages on page 106. This is what part that the Daishonin is going to mention. And here's the deal. When you catch what I'm trying to convey is something that I caught, okay? Because something that I have always felt in the back of my mind, it was weird when the Daishonin talks about what he's going through. And now after 50 years, by the way, I've had another Gohonzon birthday, so I'm in my 51st year now, 50 full years of practicing like a crazy person. You know, you begin to see your life reflect the same aspects that they're talking about, that they're having to deal with and go through themselves. And no one had preceded the Daishonin in what he had gone through. There had not been a votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law prior to Nichiren. There are many now. Everybody around this table is a votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law, qualifying that they are a disciple of the original teacher. The original teacher qualified he's the original teacher by bringing forth the ultimate teaching, the great pure law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? So when you read the Lotus Sutra and you listen to Shakyamuni talk about himself, you will find, if you are actually aspiring toward Buddhahood or you've achieved Buddhahood, your life also reflects many of those aspects. There are parallels there. Those are lessons for you to understand. But the more correct understanding of them is the fact that the Daishonin went through all those things as well, and then ultimately made those same pronouncements for those same reasons. It was to qualify that he is an entity of the mystic law. He is a thus come one, exactly as he is right now, just like you are. Okay? Now, when we try to share this Buddhism with other people, quite often they blow us off from what we're saying, when in reality we're opening the door to change their karma eternally. Yet they cannot appreciate it and they cannot understand what we've conveyed. And Shakyamuni is going to talk about it right here. I just want to go, this goes all the way back to the Lotus Sutra. Okay? It's not something that came about with the three presidents and we're trying to create a mentor and disciple kind of relationship with the three, you know. No, it's not for political or power. It's for reality, for you to understand the responsibility, the truth, and the measure of what you're going to have to go through if you're really going to be like Mike, if you're really going to be like them. If you're the same mind as Nichiren, that means you do not begrudge your life. Whoa, that's a big thing. It's easy to say. It's a very difficult thing to persevere through. Okay? So here's Shakyamuni copying to Shariputra, okay, in the Simile and Parable chapter, saying, pardon me, but now this threefold world is all my domain, and the living beings in it are all my children. Now this place is beset by many pains and trials. I am the only person who can rescue and protect others. Why? Because he's God? Because he's special? No, because he's the Buddha. He perceives the true nature of all things, and he's there to teach that true nature of all things. It's never been perceived before. It's never been revealed before. It's not reflected in any other philosophy or religion. Where he's coming from, and then where it goes with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and Nichiren. Period. And though he says, though, I am the only person who can rescue and protect others, but though I teach and instruct them, they do not believe or accept my teachings because they're tainted by their own karma. Okay? And nothing I can do about that but try and help them past it, because karma is not permanent in any circumstance. It can always be transformed. There's no such thing as immutable karma. Okay? There had been until the Lotus Sutra, but the Lotus Sutra blew all that away. Said there's no immutable karma. Women can become Buddhas. Evil people can become Buddhas. Okay? Cause awakened ones and voice hearers can become Buddhas. Everybody that I said couldn't become a Buddha, they all get to become Buddhas. As a matter of fact, I'll make a prediction that when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, what they're going to be called. I already know them all. So we have to get past the thought that all this stuff in our lives happens because of right now. It doesn't really happen because of right now. It happens because of what's preceded right now. And it's revealed in right now. And right now is when we can change poison into medicine, regardless of what we're faced with. And that's the whole point of this Gosho. Okay? Encouragement to a sick person is written to whom? Page 51. I'm going to read the Gosho next week, but it's got so many terms and things in it that I wanted to go through to make sure there's a clear understanding of what he's saying. I'll read it next time. I wanted to go into President Ikeda's lecture first. Okay, so encouragement to a sick person. Who knows who this was written to? So none of you really have prepared for this. Good. It'll all be a great surprise for you. It's to Nanjo Tokimitsu's dad. Yeah. Okay? And it's at a time when Nanjo Tokimitsu's dad is, according to President Ikeda, 46 years old, or 43 years old. Okay? So he's not an older guy. He's in the prime of his life. Yet, he has something that is effectively terminal. We know this from the ultimate end result. Okay? And he hasn't been practicing that long, although he has been a main practitioner since the Daishonin has revealed his teaching. And of course, he's gone all over to different places. And he's in the Nanjo area. Okay, he finally is in Kamakura at some point in time. It was assumed he must have run into Nichiren there. Him and a few other guys picked up on this right away. But all of them were primarily Nimbutsu, because Nimbutsu had taken over everything. Okay? Do you understand that? Okay, because before the clarification of the Daishonin, what was the understanding among Buddhists as they practiced the different teachings that Shakyamuni had left behind that had become various different schools with different practices than one another? There was no common practice between all of them. Okay? Why was that? Why did nobody worried about what kind of school that they were in versus some other school, or copped attitudes about teachings of other schools that conflicted with their schools? Because Shakyamuni taught all kinds of stuff that conflicted with stuff he'd already said, right. By the way, in case you don't know that. That's why there's so many schools. Okay, do you know why? because it was believed at that time that as long as you did something, it was all Mahayana. There was no Hinayana going on really, precepts, but it was Mahayana precepts, okay? It was to look like a really righteous person more than anything else, you know. It was basically everybody was Mahayana, so everybody just, you know, you could do the Flower Garland Sutra, you could do Amida, you could do True Word, you could do name any of the other ones, okay? All right, so the Daishonin is the one, though, that comes out and says, no, it's now the latter day of the law, and the only thing anybody should be doing is the Lotus Sutra, okay? And actually, everybody should be chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo because it's time, okay? And that's the correct teaching for now. So I wanted you to understand that what he's going to talk about really is in the Lotus Sutra. You can, every time Nichiren quotes the Lotus Sutra, I go back and I read the Lotus Sutra to see where he quoted, because if it was important enough for him to remember it in the process of encouraging another person, I should make sure I know what he's talking about and where that's at. Okay? I encourage all of you to have that same attitude. So going to, finally, starting page 51, from the Gosho, encouragement to a sick person. Again, it's to Nanjo Hyoe Shichiro, Shijo Kingo's dad, leading victorious lives with unshakable faith. What's unshakable faith refer to? And what's a victorious life? Huh? Never being defeated, but what most specifically never being defeated by? Exactly. Your faith. It always boils down, faith is the most important thing the last moment of your life. Okay? Period. All right? So, leading victorious lives with unshakable faith. If you have unshakable faith, it should probably last the last moment of your life, and then your life will have been victorious. Because in the absence of that, you didn't have a victorious life. You had the ball in your hand and you dropped it. You chanted, but for some reason you stopped. You had faith, but for some reason you gave it up. It wasn't unshakable. It got shook. That happens when bad stuff happens and we're anticipating only good stuff happens to us because we chant. Okay? And that's not really the point. The point is that birth, old age, sickness, and death are going to come around, if nothing else, regardless. Okay? So you're going to have to go through some sort of sufferings, as well as understanding that the teaching already qualifies that difficulties will beset the votary. Right? So it's called out in the teaching. Your understanding should be on the front end. This ain't going to be easy. This ain't going to be a cakewalk. This ain't going to be benefit, 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 benefit. Like most of our practices started. Yeah. Most of our practices start benefit. That's almost showed you on us. Okay? So, here we go. The Daishonin is writing to Nanjo, Hyoe Shichiro. I have heard that you are suffering from illness. Is this true? The impermanence of this world is such that even the healthy cannot remain forever, let alone those who are ill. Thoughtful persons should therefore prepare their minds for the life to come. Okay? Yet one cannot prepare one's mind for the next life by one's own efforts alone. And I'll talk about a good friend of ours that's facing another health challenge that just popped up that's life-threatening once again. So we'll all be chanting for him again. I'll talk about that after we close. Thoughtful persons. But again, the bottom line is when we started doing these study meetings, we were all a little bit younger than we are right now. Really, I mean, some of us, like that's almost a quarter of your life we've been doing this, okay? So thoughtful persons should therefore prepare their minds for the life to come means that as we grow older, we should be realistic about the fact that we're getting closer to the end than we are to the beginning. Okay? And while we worry about the mundane nine world so much while we're growing up, we're growing older, we're in our careers, we have our kids, we have our families, we have whatever. When we're faced with these circumstances that could be life-threatening, we need to take them seriously. And we need to get our heads straight just in case. That's it. Don't forget, his youngest son died when he was 16, thrown off a horse. Nanjo Tokimitsu's younger brother. Right? So shit happens.
Right.
Okay? And we should not live in a fairy world that has nothing to do with the teaching. Okay? Christianity's for Christians. Buddhists deal with reality. Okay? Thoughtful persons should therefore prepare their minds for the life to come. Yet one cannot prepare one's mind for the next life by one's efforts alone. Only on the basis of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, the original teacher of all living beings, can one do so. And again, this is, as Letter to Misawa says, this is his initial teachings. He hasn't seen himself as the true Buddha yet, or he has not qualified that he's the votary of the latter day. The Buddha's teachings, however, are various, perhaps because people's minds also differ greatly. That's from page 76. Moreover, he continues further into the Gosho. Moreover, every single person is guilty of slander of the law, an offense that exceeding even the 10 evil acts of the 5 cardinal sins. Although few people slander the Lotus Sutra with actual words of abuse, there are none who accept it. Some appear to accept the sutra, but their faith in it is not as deep as their faith in the Nimbutsu or other teachings. And even those with profound faith do not reproach the enemies of the Lotus Sutra. And then he goes on to qualify here, for your sake. However great the good causes one may make, or even if one reads and copies the entirety of the Lotus Sutra 1,000 or 10,000 times to attain the way of perceiving 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, to attain Buddhahood in your present form, if one fails to denounce the enemies of the Lotus Sutra, it will be impossible to attain the way. To illustrate, it is like the case of someone in the service of the imperial court. Even though he may have served for a decade or two, if he knows someone to be an enemy of the emperor, but neither reports him to the throne nor shows him personal animosity toward him, all the merit of his past services will thereby be negated, and he will instead be charged with an offense. You must understand that the people of this age are slanderers of the law. Okay, now, what is this age that we live in? It's the same age as the age that he's referring to. So what did he just say about us? There are none of us that haven't slandered the law. Okay, if you only think about this lifetime, and mom and dad were members, and I was raised with the Gohonzon, and I've been chanting my whole life, it may be difficult for you to perceive some even potentiality of that. Okay, but slander of the law occurs in a lot of ways that a lot of people don't really think of it as slander. Okay, if I happen to hear somebody saying something disrespectful and out of a point of trying to be civil, I don't qualify an address to that. Okay, I just slandered the law by keeping my mouth shut.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything more than just keep my mouth shut and mind my own business. That's all I did. That's slander. Okay, So we may not think we slander the law, but we do slander the law, even right now as practitioners of this Buddhism, and we do it with regularity. We do it every time we say we're going to chant Daimoku and we don't. Okay? Really, we do it every time we blow off Gongyo. Well, I could go on and on about all the mundane things that are natural realities of years and years and years of practice, okay? Or having made that determination to chant Daimoku and then having feelings of like, I don't want to do this, okay? All those devilish functions, okay, that we allow to exist because we put up with them, we listen to them. We don't say, get out of here and make it go. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So each one of those things, we're slandering. So I just need to let you know you're not as pure as the driven snow if you might think you are. Okay? And the only way then that you can win is to know that you're not.
Right.
Okay? If you think your shit don't stink, you definitely have stinky poop. All right? It's a fact, because just in making that statement, you showed how deluded you are.
Yes.
Okay? Even the Buddha has the 9 worlds. There's no 10th world Buddha floating around. There's no Amida. No. Okay? Those don't exist in the Sahe world.
Right.
All right? So, all right. To illustrate, it is like the case of someone in the service of the imperial court. Even though he may have served for a decade or two, if he knows someone to be an enemy of the emperor but neither reports him to the throne nor shows personal animosity toward him, all the merit of his past services will thereby be negated, and he will instead be charged with an offense. You must understand that the people of this age are slanderers of the law, even though they're all bodhisattvas of the earth, whether they chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo or not. Wow. That's almost like a, how can that be? All right? The two are not disassociated with one another. All right? Continuing with the Gosho. As members of your family seem to be Nimbutsu adherents, they certainly must be urging it upon you. That is understandable since they themselves believe in it. You should regard them, however, as people deluded by the followers of the diabolical Honen. Arouse strong faith and do not heed what they say. It is the way of the great devil to assume the form of a venerable monk or to take possession of one's father, mother, or brother in order to obstruct happiness in one's next happiness in one's next life. Whatever they may say, however cleverly they may try to deceive you into discarding the sutra, do not assent to it. I need a tissue. Is there one on the table anywhere? Okay, there's one in my chair. Thank you. Do not assent to it. So he's saying no matter how your family tries to get you, especially because you're really sick, to start chanting, Namu Amida Butsu, do not do that. Do not do that. You only adhere to the Lotus Sutra because the Lotus Sutra says to drop everything that precedes it. Okay? So he says, and then he says to him again, hopefully you're going to get well. If you listen to me, you might. If you don't, you probably won't. He says, should you depart from this life before I do, you must report to Brahma, Shakra, the 4 heavenly kings, and King Yame, I believe it is. Declare yourself to be a disciple of the priest Nichiren, the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in Japan. Then they cannot possibly treat you discourteously. But if you should be of 2 minds, alternately chanting the Nimbutsu and reciting the Lotus Sutra, and fear what others may say about you, then even though you identify yourself as Nichiren's disciple, they will never accept your word. Do not resent me later. Yet, since the Lotus Sutra answers one's prayers regarding matters in this life as well, you may still survive your illness. In this case, I will by all means meet with you as soon as possible and talk with you directly. Words cannot be set down in a letter, and a letter never adequately conveys one's thoughts, so I will stop for now. But he makes this admonition in several letters where he says, if you should die for any reason, you get to Eagle Peak, make sure you tell them that you're a disciple of Nichiren. He doesn't say tell them you're a disciple of Shakyamuni. He doesn't say tell them, make sure you tell them that you're, Nimbutsu, that you're Amida. He says me, Nichiren, all right? And that's because he's the original teacher. There is no teacher that precedes the original teacher. That's why he's called the original teacher of what? Kuan Ganjo, beginningless time. Nothing precedes beginningless time. That's the cool thing about it. You can go back as far as you want. You can't get to the beginning. Okay. It's the region of the unfathomable. Continuing on page 53 with the lecture. All right. Continuing to polish our lives to the very end is critical. Okay, so what did that just say? What did that just say? He's writing this to Shichiro Hyoe, right? Pardon me, yeah, Shichiro. He's writing this to Shichiro because Shichiro is sick.
Right.
But what did he just say there? What did President Ikeda just qualify? We must continue to polish our lives to the very end. It's critical. That's what that Daishonin is telling Shichiro. He's not saying it's not about, hey, chant and you're going to get well. He's saying basically, this could be it. You better chant because now's the time to be doing it.
Yes.
Okay, and nothing else. Okay, and should you be able to reflect enough fortune to overcome this, never forget this point. All right, and share it with others. Make your life. The key is to always go out as an example. That's the point. The point is that why is it important to uphold your faith to the last moment of your life? What's the big deal? Because that's what you got to do to be a part of the club? What? That's the only way you can truly be an example to someone for the entirety of their life, not just for some segment of it. Okay? That's how everyone is supposed to live their life, regardless of what they did prior to the end of their lives. Now that you're getting toward that point where it's more than likely you're closer to the end, you should get serious about the correct thing. So President Ikeda is saying, as a statement of fact, continuing to polish our lives to the very end is critical. We must not retire from Buddhism. We must not think we already know enough. There's nothing more to know. We've taught everybody we're supposed to teach. There's nobody else to teach. We are too old to teach. We can't teach. We've got to figure out a way. We've got to figure out a way to not just sit there and wait for death. All right? Nichiren Buddhism enables us to adorn the final chapter of our lives with brilliant victory, free of any regrets. Because if you can make it to the end of your life, you have no reason to have any regrets. You've just assured yourself of Buddhahood eternally, in every lifetime to come. Founding Soka Gakkai president Tetsuburo Makaguchi was 57 when he first took faith in the mystic law. 57, okay? Most of you aren't that old yet. And that's when President Makaguchi began. Along with his beginning his Buddhist practice, he also began striving towards self-perfection because he already realized he was an older man. Mr. Makaguchi had a habit of saying, "We, the youth." In the youthful spirit suggested by these words, he fought tirelessly through his 60s and 70s to carry out the momentous undertaking of bringing Nichiren Buddhism back to life among the people of modern times. After Mr. Makaguchi died in prison for his beliefs, His devoted disciple, second Soka Gakkai president Josei Toda, carried on his vision and dedicated the rest of his life to propagating the mystic law. Mr. Toda's life of only 58 years may be short by today's standards, but in that time he engaged in a great struggle equivalent to many centuries worth of effort and established the foundation for the development of Kosen Rufu while entrusting the completion of his mission to us, the youth. Now, once again, that used to bother me. When I first started practicing and I found out that President Toda only lived to be 58, I went, what the hell? Why couldn't you just chant and fix that? I mean, how important are you? You know everything. I mean, you're the mentor. How can you die at 58? Yeah. It's because there's always someone following the mentor that he's taught. That's why he's called mentor. You don't have to worry about someone fading and there being nobody to replace that person. That's never the case. And you should never hang on the persons that's passed forever and ever as though there's no one else qualified to take their place. Or else they'll become a legend and everything will get distorted. We are all human beings. We're all common mortals. That's how we're born. But we're all eternal as it relates to the significant our life, the essence of our life. And we're all bodhisattvas of the earth. And we've already all attained Buddhahood. The Buddha nature is already present in our lives as human beings. It's in the lives of all living beings. All right? So he's saying, after Mr. Makaguchi died in prison for his beliefs, I didn't, again, the youth. No, I didn't read this, did I?
Yeah, you did. You finished.
I finished the page. Okay. So, excuse me. Page 54. Illness gives rise to the resolve to attain the way. There are a lot of people that start chanting really hard and earnestly when they find out they're really sick. I know other people, though, that the fact that they got sick and they were ill, they were really sick, destroyed their faith because they thought somehow that by chanting, that should never happen to them. That should never happen to them. They shouldn't suddenly find out they've got stage 4 cancer. Rather than turning that poison into medicine by going out whenever that's going to be. You don't presuppose stage 4 is going to kill you. You don't accept that and then get pissed because you're stage 4. You fight, okay? And it doesn't matter if you die 2 days later, 1 day later, an hour later. If you're in fighting in that process, you've won, okay? So he says, illness gives rise to the resolve to attain the way. Do you guys know people that have lost their faith because they got a result at the end of life that they thought they didn't deserve? You don't know anybody like that. Good. I do. Somebody very close to me. It hurts me very much that he suffers in the bitterness and disillusionment and delusion that he does. And this is a guy that's met President Ikeda to the point that so many times he brags about it. Okay? He was a big leader in the organization. Okay? And he didn't get it. He didn't understand the point. It wasn't about making dinner with President Ikeda. It was about becoming Buddha in your present form. It was about understanding the teaching legitimately, not superficially.
Right.
Okay? Because when you only understand it superficially, the devils can take advantage. Okay? So, with its high life expectancy, Japanese society is now graying at an unprecedented rate. No one can escape aging, sickness, and death. Not even Daisaku Ikeda. Everyone must face these very real sufferings. Our Buddhist practice does not make us immune to aging or to illness. We may sometimes wonder why our faith doesn't shield us from such things. As we age, it is only natural that we may not be as spry and energetic as we once were. All living things are subject to the sufferings of birth, age, sickness, and death. Even the earth, even our solar system, even our galaxy, okay? it's all going to dissipate and reformulate. All right, it's going to transform. Everything transforms endlessly. Aging, illness, and death are innate to life. Even things like earth. But when we, as practitioners of the mystic law, view these universal sufferings from the profound perspective of the eternity of life and continue to forge ahead courageously, we can make the originally inherent nature of birth and death shine in our lives. And I was going to read you that from the OTT, and I blew it because I'm not prepared to now. It's over there. In another letter, you should read what he writes about in that. In another letter, Nichiren Daishonin writes, illness gives rise to the resolve to attain the way. That's his other one to a sick person. Even if we should experience illness, it has deep meaning, and it's not just bad karma. Sometimes it can be the only thing that was powerful enough to influence us to change as human beings. Okay? We will definitely come to appreciate the Daishonin's words. Could not this illness be the Buddha's design? Illness can be an opportunity. Illness can be, it doesn't say, he's not saying illness is, because it's based on what you do.
Yes.
All right? Illness can be an opportunity for lessening karmic retribution, for changing poison into medicine. Everything in our lives is fuel for polishing our lives so that we have no regrets. Everything that happens allows us to show proof of achieving the state of eternal happiness that we call attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime. We have nothing to worry about. Since we have already entered the path to future victory, our aging, sickness, and death reveal their true intrinsic nature, illuminated by the mystic law. So it could be that we have the kind of death that actually teaches many others lessons about the truth of death. We may have been prepared to suffer that for the sake of expressing it, because other people believe in fairy tales. Okay? The Daishonin did all he could to personally engage with his followers who were suffering from illness, compassionately offering them both encouragement and stern advice. In this chapter, let us study a letter that the Daishonin wrote to Nanjo Hyoei Shichiro, the father of his young disciple Nanjo Tokimitsu, and learn about the importance of developing unshakable faith to bring our lives to a victorious close. Developing an unshakable faith to bring our lives to a victorious close. Hopefully we already have unshakable faith. If we don't, let's work on it. Page 54, second column, from the Gosho, a letter of lasting significance for the Nanjo family. And again, why can we read this? Why can we know this guidance directly from Nichiren Daishonin? Only because Nanjo Shichiro is sick.
True.
Okay? And only because the encouragement that he needs is the encouragement many will need. All right? But how will they get it? Only by it being passed from one Buddha to another.
Yes.
That's Kosen Rufu. Okay? Or it could have all ended with the Nanjo family. Okay? But because of their relationship with Nichiren Daishonin, what happened? What's significant about the Tokimitsus? They protected the correct teaching by providing the land for Taisekuji when Nikko Shonin needed a place to go. When he said, N-I-K-K-O be crazy. He'd be sucking it up and not doing things that we're supposed to do. He's confusing the Buddhism of harvest with Buddhism of sowing. And it's because he was out in the field. He didn't even know about it. Okay, so again, a letter of lasting significance all this time, and I'm talking about it now, trying to use it as a form of encouragement to all of you, as President Keita has. Here he goes. I have heard that you, Nanjo Hyoei Shichiro, are suffering from illness. Is this true? The impermanence of this world is such that even the healthy cannot remain forever, let alone those who are ill. Thoughtful persons should therefore prepare their minds for the life to come. Yet one cannot prepare one's mind for the next life by one's efforts alone. Only on the basis of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, the original teacher of all living beings, can one do so. Provisional is the word I was constantly trying to think. This is the provisional perspective, okay? Understand? Prior to Tassa Noguchi. After that, he qualifies himself, all right? I have heard that you, Nanjo Hyoei, without ever being disrespectful to Shakyamuni. It has nothing to do with disrespect. It has to do with the age. It has to do with the five things of propagation, which is what he's going to teach Nanjo Hyoei Shichiro in this letter. I have heard that you, Nanjo Hyoei Shichiro, are suffering from illness. Is this true? Begins the Daishonin. Hyoei Shichiro, Tokimitsu's father, was suffering from a serious illness. Hearing of this, the Daishonin immediately wrote to express his concern. Hyoei Shichiro was originally a believer in the Pure Land Nimbutsu teachings. Probably while residing in Kamakura on an official tour of duty. Pardon me. However, he became a disciple of the Daishonin and began practicing the Lotus Sutra. At his estate in Ueno village in Fuji district of Suruga province, it is supposed that he found himself surrounded by family members and relatives who were all Nimbutsu followers, while he and his immediate family were only practitioners of the mystic law. Were the only practitioners of the mystic law, chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In addition, many powerful members of the Hojo clan possessed estates in Suruga, and the province was under the sway of strong believers in the Nimbutsu teaching. These included the influential widow of the late regent Hojo Tokiyori, who also happened to be the daughter of the late Hojo Shige Toki, a high-ranking government official who had been a co-signer of the regent Hojo Tokiyori and an ardent Nimbutsu follower who had persecuted the Daishonin. Now that Hyoei Shichiro was seriously ill, his relatives must have urged him, motivated by concern for the welfare of his wife and children, to return to the practice of Nimbutsu. You can imagine anybody, any family, they're going to say, man, this is happening because you drifted off in the wrong direction. It's your job to prove to them, no, that's not the case. He says, top of page 55, second column, recognizing the spiritual conflict Hyoei Shichiro was no doubt undergoing, the Daishonin wrote in this letter, encouragement to a sick person, to impart resolute conviction and peace of mind. In it, he stresses that maintaining steadfast faith in the Lotus Sutra is the correct way to bring this life to a victorious close and to enter the path of happiness into eternity. That's eternal Buddhahood, right? This is the only surviving letter from the Daishonin to Hyoei Shichiro, but it is a powerful one that must have had a decisive effect on the latter's faith, helping him to realize that faith in the mystic law was the only way to protect his wife and children. The Daishonin's wholehearted encouragement ensured that Hyoei Shichiro's wife, the lay nun Ueno, how many letters have we read that were written to her? Okay, they wouldn't have been written if he'd have switched back to, if he'd have gone back to Nimbutsu. Okay, she would have stuck with whatever her husband was doing. Nanjo Tokimitsu would have never started practicing. Okay, so where would Nico have gone at the crucial moment when he needed to leave Mount Minobu? Well, else would be stuck with Nichiren Shu, and we'd all be using Shakyamuni Buddha as an incorrect object of devotion. So this whole letter, just this letter, was that important, because just this family was that important, which says any one of you can be just that important. None of these dudes are any different than any of us. None. Right. Okay, they ain't better than us. They're not different than us. It's exactly the same. Some of them may be us. Okay? Frankly. Okay, I don't know where I was. Was I here? Where? Okay, that's right. It's only Okay. I'm already to encouraging a disciple? No. I'll go ahead. This is the only surviving letter from the Daishonin to Hyoei Shichiro, but is a powerful one that must have had a decisive effect on the latter's faith, helping him realize that faith in the mystic law was the only way to protect his wife and child. The Daishonin's wholehearted encouragement ensured that Hyoei Shichiro's wife, the lay nun Ueno, their son Tokimitsu, and the entire Nanjo family would persevere in their practice of the correct teaching, and that the family's name would remain a brilliant presence in the history of Kosen Rufu. Encouraging a disciple immediately after personally suffering persecution. This happened only a month after the Komatsubara persecution, where he almost died, the Daishonin. Page 55, last paragraph. This letter was written in December 1264, a few months earlier in autumn. The Daishonin had returned to his hometown in Awa province for the first time in 10 years to visit his mother, who was suffering from illness, and to pray for her recovery. After she recovered her health, he is thought to have remained in Awa for a time to propagate his teachings. In November 1264, Tojo Kaganobu, the local steward who harbored enmity toward the Daishonin, led several hundred Nimbutsu followers in an attack on him and his party of about a dozen followers. Several hundred against about a dozen. Later known as the Komatsubara persecution. How perilous an assault it must have been. As the Daishonin notes in this letter, which we didn't read this part. As arrows fell on us like rain, and swords descended like lightning. One of the Daishonin's followers was killed in the attack almost as soon as he got there. The guy that he was going to go visit went to Kotoke to his rescue when he found out he was being attacked. He was killed almost immediately. The Daishonin received a cut on his forehead, and his left hand was broken. And he got out of it with only that. It was a persecution that arose from his propagating the Lotus Sutra, just as had been predicted in the Buddhist scriptures themselves. So, okay, when he tried to deliver Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the great pure law, in the 5th 500-year period, just as it had been prophesied by Shakyamuni in the Great Collection Sutra, he almost lost his life. Did he begrudge his life? No. No matter what, he didn't stop. Only a month later, even before his wounds completely healed, the Daishonin composed this letter of considerable length to Hyoei Shichiro. We can see here the great compassion of the Daishonin, who, unconcerned for his own health, devoted himself to encouraging an ailing disciple. The Buddhist view of the eternity of life. This is very key. Bottom of page 56, first column. The Buddhist view of the eternity of life. What does that mean? How do we view life? We view life as never ending. So does Christianity, supposedly. You either go to hell forever or you go to heaven forever. Okay? Same thing for a couple of kinds of Buddhism as well. You either, You either go to, right? Okay. But what this is qualifying is that the original Buddhism is the only teaching that has infinity in both directions. Eternity is literally infinity, correct? Okay? Buddhism's the only one that teaches infinity in both directions. There's no creation. Kuan is Kuan. It's beginningless. There's no creator. There's no creator in Buddhism. There isn't everything else. Okay? The Buddhist view of the eternity of life. That's why he's changing it. There's lots of views of the eternity of life. They're not correct. Ours is the only correct one, because the only correct one is the one that has no beginning, just like it has no end. If you're saying it's possible to never have an end, then it's possible that it never had a beginning. After opening his letter with an expression of concern for Hyoei Shichiro's condition, the Daishonin goes on to note that not only those who are ill indeed, but indeed all people inevitably face death. For that reason, he says, thoughtful individuals must carefully consider the matter of the next life. With these profound words, he underscores that because this life is fleeting, we should use it to build an eternal state of indestructible happiness. The four sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death are fundamental issues. That means they're fundamental. They're there every time for every person. In one of our discussions, the British historian Arnold J. Toynbee remarked perceptively that society's leaders fail to consider in earnest the question of life and death, completely sidestepping it. As a result, he said, they are unable to provide any fundamental resolution to problems facing society and lying in wait. The Daishonin tells us that to prepare our minds for the next life and develop a firm sense of assurance, the wisdom of ordinary mortals is insufficient. We can't conceive of that reality and have any confidence in our own thoughts about it. We can't explain it in the absence of a teacher that qualifies how it exists. To do so, he says, they must base themselves upon the teachings of the Buddha, the original teacher of all living beings. But there are many different Buddhist teachings, he points out. Which teaching expresses the Buddha's true intent? In this letter, the Daishonin sets out the 5 guides for propagation, namely the teaching, the people's capacity, the time, the country, and the sequence of propagation as the criteria for selecting the correct Buddhist teaching. The direct path to Buddhahood, top of page 57. From the Gosho. Moreover, every single person is guilty of slander of the law, an offense exceeding even the 10 evil acts or the 5 cardinal sins. Although few people slander the Lotus Sutra with actual words of abuse, there are none who accept it. Some appear to accept the sutra, but their faith in it is not as deep as their faith in the Nimbutsu or other teachings. And even those who, with profound faith, do not reproach the enemies of the Lotus Sutra. However great the good causes one may make, or even if one reads and copies the entirety of the Lotus Sutra 1,000 or 10,000 times, or attains the way of perceiving 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, if one fails to denounce the enemies of the Lotus Sutra, it will be impossible to attain the way. To illustrate it is like the case of someone in the service of the imperial court. Even though he may have served for a decade or two, if he knows someone to be an enemy of the emperor, but neither reports him to the throne nor shows personal animosity toward him, all the merit of his past services will be thereby negated, and he will instead be charged with an offense. You must understand that the people of this age are slanderers of the law. Very bottom of page 57, first column. The true intent of the Buddha is for all living beings to attain Buddhahood. That is, to attain a state of indestructible happiness. What is the correct teaching of Buddhism for all people, and who is truly propagating it? In this letter, through the 5 guides for propagation, the Daishonin carefully explains that the Lotus Sutra is the great teaching that can lead all people to enlightenment in the latter day of the law, and that he himself is the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in Japan. Starting with the first of the 5 guides, the teaching, the Daishonin's Buddhism of sowing, the Daishonin states that in the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni says, referring to his first 40 years of preaching, I have not yet revealed the truth. And that now he is honestly discarding expedient means. With the preamble, and now I must reveal the truth, Shakyamuni presents the Lotus Sutra as the culmination of his teaching. In addition, the Daishonin says that it is Shakyamuni who possesses the 3 virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent, to whom living beings owe a profound debt of gratitude. Or people of the former and the middle day, for sure. The Daishonin declares that however long people may practice the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, if they never chant if they never once chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the essence of the Lotus Sutra, which the Buddha revealed to be the true teaching, then they will be unfilial, betraying the Buddha to whom they owe everything. In other words, Shakyamuni said, the Lotus Sutra is my ultimate teaching. You know, I must reveal the truth, disregard the expedient means, all that. If you don't do that, then you're disrespecting Shakyamuni, no matter how much you may praise Amida, no matter how much you may do all your mudras and madras as a true word person. Again, if you don't follow the teaching that it's only the Lotus Sutra as the basis of his ultimate teaching, okay? The Daishonin declares that however long people may practice the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, if they never once chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the essence of the Lotus Sutra, which the Buddha revealed to be the true teaching, then they will be unfilial, betraying the Buddha to whom they owe everything. The second of the 5 guides of propagation is the people's capacity, specifically their capacity to understand and accept the teachings. In the latter day of the law, because of their inferior capacity, people are controlled by earthly desires, leading to many evil deeds. Because they reject fundamental great good, because they reject the fundamental great good of the Lotus Sutra, slander of the law is widespread. That is why it is of paramount importance not only to practice the correct teaching oneself, but to also rebuke slander of the law. But here's the kicker. It's really hard to rebuke slander of the law if you don't know what slander is. It's real hard to rebuke that slander if you don't know what the teachings actually are. That's why we're encouraged not just faith, but practice and study. If we don't study, we will not know this stuff. That's why the Daishonin says you can't get there just by yourself. He's talking about the requirement of there being a teacher of some sort. If it's not him, it's got to be somebody that he taught. All right? That's why it is of paramount importance not only to practice the correct teaching oneself, but also to rebuke slander of the law. No matter what great good one creates or how arduously one practices the Lotus Sutra, that Daishonin says, if one fails to denounce the enemies of the Lotus Sutra, it will be impossible to attain the way. Reading this, Hyoei Shichiro doubtless awakened to what was most crucial at that moment for his own attainment of Buddhahood. It is important to note that the Daishonin's usage of the expression enemies of the Lotus Sutra here, it is important to note the Daishonin's usage of the expression enemies of the Lotus Sutra here. The teachings expounded by Shakyamuni before the Lotus Sutra do not automatically fall into this category because they also give basic direction for attaining the Buddhist way. The established Buddhist schools of Japan during the Daishonin's time, however, have become attached exclusively to the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings and oppose the Lotus Sutra. Don't forget what's preceding all of this in Japan. Why does the Daishonin perceive all this stuff that he perceives about the Lotus Sutra? Where is he getting it from? From Shakyamuni? Yeah, some of it's literal, but where is he getting an awful lot of it? From who? From Tentai, from the further clarification of Myolo, but most importantly from Dengyo, who has already accomplished having the ordination platform built. He's already proven to the sovereign that the Lotus Sutra is the supreme teaching, okay? And it gets convoluted by Chisho and Jikaku. Those are the guys that brought in True Word. So True Word has been brought into the mix here, all right? As well as Nimbutsu, and then Nimbutsu with Honen, because he's saying, you know, the true Mahayana is too hard. So you need something simple. So again, he says, The established Buddhist schools of Japan during the Daishonin's time, however, had become attached exclusively to the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings and opposed the Lotus Sutra. Representative of this trend was the teaching of Honen, the founder of the Pure Land Nembutsu school of Buddhism in Japan. Thus, the term enemies of the Lotus Sutra here refers to those Buddhist teachings that reject the full potential of human beings, expounding teachings that refuse to recognize the innate dignity of all, and consigning people to a state of powerlessness and misery. Nichiren Daishonin's spirit was to resolutely refute such slander of the law that caused people suffering. In his personal copy of the Daishonin's writings, Mr. Makaguchi heavily underlined and read the following passage. However great the good causes one may make, even if one reads and copies the entirety of the Lotus Sutra 1,000 or 10,000 times, or attains the way of perceiving 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, if one fails to denounce the enemies of the Lotus Sutra, it will be impossible to attain the way. And that is the reason why Mr. Makaguchi remonstrated with the priesthood about having the Shinto talisman in the Butsudan's of all of their practitioners, accepting the emperor's decree that everybody had to have the Shinto talisman. He said, according to the Daishonin's teaching, we are not to accept other objects of devotion. He went and gave shit to the high priest of Nichiren Shoshu, and the priesthood of Nichiren Shoshu said, what are we supposed to do? They'll burn down the temple if we don't do what they tell us to. So they did it. They committed that slander. They can say that it was to protect Buddhism, but it did not keep in keeping. And so what happened then when they reported to the authorities that President Makaguchi had come and said something about the Shinto talisman? The authorities brought him in for questioning, and of course President Toda was with him, just like he was there when he remonstrated. They both wouldn't give it up. They both ended up going to prison because of all of this. Okay, and then when President Toda got out of prison and got the organization going again, what did he do? He went to the head temple and remonstrated again with the high priest and all the priesthood and said, how could you have left us hanging? How could you have not denounced this slander of the law? Okay? And that's where the beginning of the difficulty between Nichiren Shoshu and Soka Gakkai started. All right? The more firmly we denounce slander of the law, the more power our Buddha nature manifests. You might want to take note of that because it's the truth. If you keep your mouth shut and you never give anybody shit about being full of shit, you don't get as much benefit. You don't get to the bottom. You don't become as wise. You're really not listening to what the whole teaching has been saying over and over again. The more firmly we denounce slander of the law. This goes all the way back to the Nirvana Sutra, by the way. This isn't something that Nichiren made up. All right? The more power our Buddha nature manifests. This enables us to vanquish our inner fundamental darkness, which we are born with as part of the original state, and win powerfully over devilish functions so that we can attain Buddhahood in our present form. We can expiate negative causes from the past and change our karma, which has been to not be able to achieve Buddhahood in our present form. We forge and I'm adding stuff here, you can see that. We forge the indestructible state of Buddhahood by speaking out with courageous faith at a crucial moment, together with and in the same spirit as our mentor. The 5 guides revealed the good medicine for the latter day, bottom of page 58. Next, the Daishonin discusses the 3rd guide for propagation. That is the time. What is the age we're in? He explains that after Shakyamuni's passing, those who correctly uphold and practice his teachings gradually declined in number, and few people pursued the way of attaining Buddhahood, just as we're going through that kind of a now, okay, since the split. We've got to all become teachers. During the latter day of the law, following the 2,000 years of the former day and the middle day of the law, top of page 59, first column, people without precepts without any precepts, who make no effort to practice and do not protect the original spirit of the Buddhist teachings abound. People's hearts are tainted, society is in turmoil, and the 5 impurities are rampant. In a defiled age, when people lose sight of the correct teachings of Shakyamuni, erroneous teachings under the name of Buddhism become rampant. They seem good, but instead of leading people to enlightenment, they guide them to evil paths and prevent them from moving toward great good. Thus, lesser good turns into great evil. In the latter day of the law, only a teaching of great good that can lead all people to enlightenment is of any use. Next, turning to the 4th guide of the propagation, the country, the Daishonin states, one must always consider the country when propagating the Buddhist teachings. I need a tissue again. I don't know what to do. Oh, it's in my pocket. Here. No, it isn't. Pardon me. Pardon me. It's not. It wasn't. I don't know what I did with it. Oh, okay. Thank you. One must always consider the country when propagating the Buddhist teachings. The Buddhist teachings must be propagated in a way that is appropriate to each country. Then referring to sutra passages and other documents, the Daishonin demonstrates that the Lotus Sutra is the Buddhist teaching suitable for Japan. The suitability of the Lotus Sutra for Japan does not mean that the capacities, the suitability of the Lotus Sutra for Japan does not mean that the capacities of the people of Japan are superior. In another writing, the Daishonin states that Japan is the land of Ikchantikas, persons of incorrigible disbelief who slander the correct teaching. Precisely because it is a place where whose people are so difficult to lead to enlightenment, the Lotus Sutra, which guarantees the attainment of Buddhahood by all living beings without exception, is suitable for Japan. The last of the 5 guides for propagation is the sequence of propagation. The Daishonin states, it is the rule in propagating Buddhism that one must always learn the nature of the teachings that have already spread. In Japan, the provisional Mahayana teachings had already been propagated. That means it was time to propagate the true Mahayana teaching of the Lotus Sutra there in Japan. It is like giving medicine to a sick person. One must know what other medicines the patient has taken before being prescribed another, the Daishonin says. The mystic law is the great good medicine that includes all benefits, prepared especially to thoroughly relieve people from unhappiness and suffering, to thoroughly relieve people from unhappiness and suffering caused by slander of the law. Old, outdated medicines are no longer necessary. In fact, continuing to take them will only have adverse effects. In this way, the Daishonin seeks in every way possible to encourage and instruct Hyoei Shichiro, who is suffering from a serious illness and struggling amid a challenging environment. Through sharing the 5 guides for propagation, as if to break through the delusions and uncertainty in his disciple's heart, he urges him to disassociate from slander of the law and assures him of attaining Buddhahood by making the mystic law his foundation. Continuing on page 60. Okay. Strong faith that is impervious to negative influences. From the Gosho. And as the members of your family seem to be Nimbutsu adherents, they certainly must be urging it upon you. It is understandable since they themselves believe in it. You should regard them, however, as people deluded by the followers of the diabolical Honen. Arouse strong faith and do not heed what they say. It is the way of the great devil to assume the form of a venerable monk or to take possession of one's father, mother, or brother in order to obstruct happiness in one's next life. Whatever they may say, however, cleverly they may try to deceive you into discarding the Lotus Sutra. Do not assent to it. Here the Daishonin urges Hyoei Shichiro to arouse strong faith and not allow negative influences to sway him. As he writes in this letter, the devilish functions can enter the lives of high-ranking Buddhist priests, parents, or siblings, and through them attempt to cause practitioners to discard their faith in the Lotus Sutra. This is an unchanging formula that holds true today as well. Bring to mind anything, guys? Such negative, let me read that again. As he writes in this letter, devilish functions can enter into the lives of high-ranking Buddhist priests. Think of anybody? Parents or siblings, and through them attempt to cause practitioners to discard their faith in the Lotus Sutra, because if you don't practice the correct teaching, you no longer have faith in the correct teaching. Do you understand? Okay, so we practice the Buddhism of sowing, the Buddhism of sun. This is an unchanging formula that holds true today as well, obviously. Such negative influences deviously seek out people's weaknesses and pretend to be acting out of concern as they try to obstruct the attainment of Buddhahood. Oh, you don't need to know anything about the Gosho. Just come to the Oko. We'll tell you what you need to know about the Gosho. When you grow up after 30 years, you won't know shit about their Gosho. And the Soka Gakkai members can start talking to you and you won't have any idea what they're talking about because you don't know the Gosho. Okay, that's a fact. We must never allow ourselves to be swayed by the whispers of such destructive negative influences and lose our faith. Once we move away from the realm of Kosen Rufu, we also veer off the fundamental path to attaining eternal happiness. We end up depriving ourselves of benefit, growth, and victory. This is just how frightening evil companions can be. The passage, "It is the way of the great devil to assume the form of a venerable monk," seems disarmingly simple, but it is an impossible warning that Mr. Toda but it is an important warning that Mr. Toda often referred to. My goodness. The passage, "It is the way of the great devil to assume the form of a venerable monk," seems disarmingly simple, but it is an important warning that Mr. Toda often referred to. In a lecture letter from Sato, Mr. Toda referred to a passage in which the Daishonin refutes evil priests who slander the Lotus Sutra. And he shared that successors of the 6 non-Buddhist teachers of Shakyamuni's day now appeared as Buddhist priests who opposed his efforts to widely propagate the 3 great secret laws. Mr. Toda predicted that as the Soka Gakkai advances in its efforts to carry out Kosen Rufu and guide the people of Japan to enlightenment in modern times, such negative influences would appear in the Nichiren Shoshu priesthood in the future. And indeed, that is exactly what happened, as we all know only too well. But the SGI parted ways with Nichiren Shoshu, which was guilty of egregious slander of the law. In the little more than 2 decades since then, the SGI has developed into a truly global religious organization, with its network expanding from 115 to 192 countries and territories today. Our organization enjoys wide trust and respect from people the world over. This is all due to the efforts of our members who have advanced Kosen Rufu and acted with complete sincerity and integrity. They are certain to experience ever greater benefit. Continuing page 61, carrying on the lion-hearted struggle of Nichiren Daishonin. That's what we're all doing, right? In the Komatsubara persecution of 1264, Nichiren Daishonin, and my ear has been buzzing this whole time. It's about to drive me crazy. In the Komatsubara persecution in 1264, Nichiren Daishonin was ambushed by a force of Nimbutsu followers under the sway of devilish functions. Toward the end of this letter, Encouragement to a Sick Person, the Daishonin describes the incident in some detail. Pardon me. In doing so, he declares, "I am therefore the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in Japan." This assertion was based on the fact that he alone, in the corrupt and evil times of the latter day of the law, had undergone this and numerous other persecutions, perfectly matching the predictions made in the Lotus Sutra of the hardships that would befall its practitioners after the Buddha's passing. Pardon me. The powerful conviction embodied in the Daishonin's declaration that this has only strengthened my faith in the Lotus Sutra must also have resonated deeply in the heart of Hyoei Shichiro as he lay on his sickbed. Second column, page 61. Declare yourself to be a disciple of the priest Nichiren. Should you depart from the Gosho, should you depart from this life before I do, you must report to Brahme, Chakra, and the four heavenly kings, the King Yame, and King Yame. Declare yourself to be a disciple of the priest Nichiren, the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in Japan. Then they cannot possibly treat you discourteously. But if you should be of two minds, alternately chanting the Nembutsu and reciting the Lotus Sutra, and fear what others may say about you, then even though you identify yourself as Nichiren's disciple, they will never accept your word.
Right.
Do not resent me later, because I told you all this stuff on the front end. Yet, since the Lotus Sutra answers one's prayers regarding matters in this life as well, it's because we can chant and get benefit, you may still survive your illness. In that case, I will by all means meet with you as soon as possible and talk with you directly. Words cannot be set down in a letter, and a letter never adequately conveys one's thoughts. So I will stop for now. Continuing, page 61, last two paragraphs. Second column. At the end of the letter, the Daishonin offers important guidance and encouragement for facing one's final moments. Perhaps he sensed that Hyoei Shichiro was gravely ill and didn't have long to live. The Daishonin urges him to the effect, should you pass away before me, tell the heavenly deities that you were a disciple of Nichiren, the foremost votary of Lotus Sutra in Japan. They are sure to protect you. How Hyoei Shichiro must have been deeply reassured by the Daishonin's encouragement. In a similar vein, the Daishonin writes in a letter to the lay nun Myoshin, whose husband, the lay priest Takahashi Rokuro Hyoei, was on his deathbed. No matter what may happen, he says, quotations, no matter what may happen on the road between this life and the next, he, your husband, should declare himself to be a disciple of Nichiren. What matters is being able to declare confidently that one is a disciple of Nichiren Daishonin. I have that starred 6 times. That is the most important thing, okay? It's that you can confidently declare yourself to have been a disciple of Nichiren Daishonin. And Daisaku Ikeda says in this very clearly that that is the most important thing. He doesn't say it's the most important thing to be a disciple of First President Makaguchi, Second President Toda, of himself, of any other high priest, of this or that. It's Nichiren, the original teacher of Kuan Ganjo. That's why he is saying what he is saying. Okay? All Buddhas acquire their Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The original teacher is the clarifier and the initiator of that original teaching. Continuing on page 62, and I say that very declaratively because I'm convinced with my whole life it's the case that if you disagree with me, that's your problem. The essence of Nichiren Buddhism is the mentor and disciple relationship. This is what my mentors taught me. The shared vow and efforts of mentor and disciple throughout the 3 existences of past and present and future triumph over all. In terms of our daily practice, this means joyously chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with pride in being members of the SGI and taking part in activities to promote Kosen Rufu. Striving this way in our Buddhist practice will activate the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout the 10 directions and the 3 existences, and we ourselves will shine eternally as Buddhas. Continuing, page 62 at the bottom of the first column. Single-minded faith. In this letter, the Daishonin certainly warns that even if one calls oneself a disciple of Nichiren, one mustn't be of 2 minds, practicing both the Nembutsu and the Lotus Sutra, depending on the time and circumstance. He seeks to drive home to Hyoei Shichiro the importance of establishing unshakable faith in the correct teaching. Two minds refers to the confusion and weakness that prevents one from being able to believe solely or fully in the Lotus Sutra. Buddhism is rigorous. There can be no compromise in its faith and practice. There can be no compromise in its faith and practice. It is rigorous. It is strict. One must always remain completely committed to it and not be of two minds. Being of two minds is having weak faith that can be affected by things and events around us. In today's terms, leaving things up to others, hoping they'll do the hard work, or being unable to denounce the enemies of the Lotus Sutra because you don't want to piss anybody off or you're afraid it'll make you look like a butt. That which constitutes slander of the law out of fear of opposition are both cases of being of two minds. The Daishonin goes, so you can't say I'm a disciple of Nichiren and blow off refuting people that are full of shit. You absolutely cannot let it pass. You don't have to be disdainful and discourteous and use the kind of language that I'm using in qualifying that. You can be polite and say nice, not use any bad words, but you must say, I have a different understanding than you do. And I owe it to myself, if not to you, to tell you what that is. And then you just let them know. You just open the door. You just turn something from a person slandering to them hearing the name and the words of the truth. Okay? So he says, in terms of our daily practice, this means joyously chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with pride and being members of the SGI. Where am I? Okay, pardon me. The Daishonin goes on to say, pardon me, I was wrong column. Second column, middle of the second column, page 62. The Daishonin goes on to say, the Lotus Sutra answers one's prayers regarding matters in this life as well. This means that our practice of the Lotus Sutra aimed toward attaining Buddhahood also brings us benefit and reward in this lifetime. What's he qualifying there? That if we're just chanting for benefits, we're really not adding a whole lot to the benefit and reward of our next life. Okay? We may be doing what's necessary to get us to that next stage. Okay? But you're only chanting about right now. You're not chanting about your next lifetime. I've been chanting about my next lifetime for 40 years. For 40 years, I've been laying it all out there saying, this is what I expect. This is what I hope to be. Okay? So please understand, it's not a small thing that you wait until you're 2 weeks out from dying really to think about. You really should be thinking, there's nobody here young enough that you don't need to really be thinking this way. And Hyoei Shichiro's 16-year-old son proved to us, no matter what age you are, if you embrace the teaching correctly and you're mature enough to understand it, you should understand life is eternal. You should understand you have multiple lives and you're never the same in any one of them. You're a temporary gathering of the 5 components. You have no permanence in to you. There's no soul to you. You're just going to reflect what you made. Always, you made what you made over and over again.
Yes.
Compassionately wishing to give him hope, the Daishonin tells Hyoei Shichiro that if he recovers from his illness and extends his life, I will by all means meet with you as soon as possible and talk with you directly. In this letter, the Daishonin persuasively and sincerely instructs Hyoei Shichiro to remain steadfast in his faith. He says he would like to meet his disciple in person to encourage him, but the seriousness of Hyoei Shichiro's illness had probably prompted him to write a letter in case a visit should prove too late. I can imagine Hyoei Shichiro on his sickbed reading the Daishonin's letter over and over again. As a result, he was able to sweep away the confusion and doubt swirling in his mind and establish a spirit of unshakable faith. Hyoei Shichiro thus opened the way to complete victory in the final chapter of his life. The treasures of the heart are never destroyed. Page 63, middle of the first column. 3 months, and then we're done.
Yeah.
3 months after receiving this letter, Hyoei Shichiro died peacefully. 3 months later, in March of 1265. So he was only 44 years old or so.
Yeah.
Later, in letters to the Nanjo family, the Daishonin assures them that Hyoei Shichiro has most definitely attained enlightenment, writing, "He doubtless attained Buddhahood just as he was. He ended his life in the frame of mind of a true believer." The Daishonin further declares, when he was alive, he was a Buddha in life, and now he is a Buddha in death. He is a Buddha in both life and death. No fear.
Right.
Right? Nor is that all. Though he had many enemies in Suruga province, the Daishonin, intent on praising and encouraging the Nanjo family, traveled to Ueno village and visited Hyoei Shichiro's grave. Hyoei's son Tokimitsu was just a little boy at that time, but he met the Daishonin. It was an encounter with the mentor who had taught his father the mystic law, which his father strove to uphold all his life. No doubt the starting point of Tokimitsu's unwavering faith was forged at that moment. The faith of Hyoei Shichiro, who humbly accepted the guidance he received from the Daishonin and lived out his life dedicated to the mystic law, even if it was only 3 months more, was securely passed on to his family. That's the whole point. It doesn't matter if it's the day before. If you make it, they will all make it.
Yes.
Passed on to his family, and in particular to his son Tokimitsu. After the Daishonin was pardoned and allowed to return from exile on Sado Island, Tokimitsu traveled to Minobu, where the Daishonin had taken up residence and was reunited with him. The Daishonin was delighted by the young man's confidence, resembling his father in his strong faith, which he had learned from his father.
Yeah.
Tokimitsu supported the Daishonin's future successor, Nikko Shonin. Pardon me. Tokimitsu supported the Daishonin's future successor, Nikko Shonin, during the Atsuhara persecution and protected his fellow practitioners. The Daishonin called Tokimitsu Ueno, the worthy, and praised the young disciple's actions. In the final chapter of his life, Nanjo Hyoei Shichiro remained a loyal disciple of the Daishonin and triumphed. He opened the way to eternal happiness for his entire family through his spirit of forever carrying on the journey of shared struggle with his mentor. We are accumulating indestructible treasures of the heart. As the Daishonin writes, our hearts can never be destroyed. Though when he says the karmic influences of what we do through our actions. As the Daishonin writes, our hearts can never be destroyed. Though we might be old and frail or weak from illness, the treasures of the heart we have accumulated throughout our lives will only shine ever more brilliantly. The benefit of having forged a connection with Buddhism is vast and immeasurable. It implants the roots of goodness in one's life. In particular, the treasure of the heart that we attain through striving for Kosen Rufu or everlasting. The last here. The joyous state of being a Buddha in life and a Buddha in death. Page 64, middle first column. As our society ages, people are more earnestly seeking the right way to live to make the final period of their lives more fulfilling and worthwhile. For this reason, it is becoming more important than ever to accumulate the treasures of the heart. And through our personal examples of dealing courageously with the sufferings of birth, aging, and sickness and death that are an inherent part of human existence, we can impart precious hope and courage, as well as the conviction of faith to our families and the young people who will succeed us. Let me read it again. It's the most important paragraph I can. As our society ages, people are more earnestly seeking the right way to live to make the final period of their lives more fulfilling and worthwhile. For this reason, it is becoming more important than ever to accumulate the treasures of the heart. And through our personal examples of dealing courageously with the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death that are an inherent part of human existence, we can impart precious hope and courage, as well as the conviction of faith to our families and the young people who will succeed us. The effort of caring for and nursing family members is indeed demanding and hard, but it is also an opportunity to deepen family ties, work together to strengthen our faith, develop a higher state of life, and accumulate ever greater good fortune and benefit. When we continually polish our lives to the very end, illuminated by the mystic law, we ensure that we and all those in our environment will forever lead lives imbued with the four noble virtues of eternity, happiness, true self, and purity. Will flip a birth, old age, sickness, and death to their non-delusional state. The individual's victory is linked to the family's victory. The individual's victory is linked to the family's victory. I talked about 6 generations, past, present, you change everything. Nanjo Hyoe Shichiro's victory not only opened the way to the victory of his wife and son Tokimitsu, but showed the way to happiness for all families who embrace the mystic law into the eternal future. You don't know, they may be writing about you someday. The experiences of the members of our Soka family are the starting point for hope in the lives of many others, and you should understand that. Your happiness is never where it ends. Your happiness always leads to others' happiness. They show us numerous cases of individuals who succeeded in becoming a Buddha in life and a Buddha in death. People for whom both life and death are infused with joy. Rousing strong faith and engaging in the courageous struggle for Kosen Rufu adorns our lives and the lives of those around us with magnificent victory. Now, we are now in the age when the great life-affirming philosophy of Nichiren Buddhism has spread around the world, creating a growing tide of humanism. The value of each day of our lives, lived to the fullest in this way, is greater than that of all the treasures in the universe. The end. And I got that mosquito. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh.